Ladies, my name is Miss Janet Miller. I'm going to be your presenter today, and we're going to get started in just a couple of minutes. But in the meantime, I have a couple of housekeeping items we need to go through. The first is, if you cannot hear me right now, I'm gonna put my video on so you can see that I'm speaking. Hopefully you can. So you can see me. Hi, I'm Janet Miller. I'm going to be your presenter today. If you cannot hear me right now, then you want to check your settings, which is in that gear box. So I'm also going to put a message out in case anyone cannot hear me. Okay. So just real quickly, so I can make sure I can hear all of you as well. Go ahead and one at a time, you can unmute yourselves and just say hello, because I want to make sure we're going to do some discussion today, and I want to make sure we can hear you. So Ariana, do you want to start?
Hello.
Hi, how are you?
Good.
Excellent. How about Taylor? Taylor, can you speak so we can hear you real quick?
Hello.
Hi, Taylor. Quinn, can you speak real quick so we can hear you?
Hi.
Hi. Heidi, can you say hello?
Hi.
Emma? Hey, Emma. Hi.
I am doing it right now.
Okay, thank you. Chloe?
Hi.
Hi, Chloe. And Cecilia?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Excellent. Well, that's great, everybody. That's fantastic. So, thanks again for coming today. Before we get too deep into things, I'm going to share with you some other things we need to do for housekeeping items. But today, we're going to go through the Senior App Development Badge. I know several of you have been with me for the past few weeks as we've been working through the Senior Coding for Good badges. And so this is the last in that series. Very exciting, and glad to have you all with me to finish this badge up today. One of the things I just want to mention is if you have any questions throughout, I may be talking and not hear you, or I might talk over top of you if you're trying to ask a question. So there is a chat box. You've probably seen the little chat emblem up in the upper right as well, near that gear. And you can put in a question to me or to anybody during our presentation today. And everybody just go ahead and mute yourselves for now, but we will have some time where we're going to be having some discussions. So I'll let you know when it's time to unmute. We can have some discussions. Also, there's the Girl Scouts of the USA wants to make sure that we stay really safe and secure in these online meetings. So one of the things they've requested is that we not have our last name showing. You can see that I've changed mine to Janet Presenter. You could either just make yours just your first name, or you could make it like Emma Girl Scout, or just your first name, or first name and last initial. So to do that, if you go to the little people icon and click on it, that's how you can see all the people who are on this call today. And then you want to select yourself, right click on your name, and you can see there it says edit your name and email. And you can edit your name to show up differently. So if everybody could make sure they do that, that'll help make sure that we're being really safe and secure in our recording today. Okay. So, as I mentioned, today we're going to talk about the Senior Coding for Good badge. One of the Senior Coding for Good badges. It is the one on the far, actually it's the one in the middle there, app development. And since it's the last one we're going to be doing, we've done coding basics, which is the one on the far left. We've also done the game development, which is on the far right. And now we're going to do app development, which is the one you see in the middle. So we'll have finished all three of those. One of the things that I found really interesting about this, just to give you a little bit of background, I am a troop leader in Charlottesville, Virginia, and I lead a senior and ambassador troop as well as a cadet troop. and I do training for our council. I know many of you who are on the call today are from councils outside of Virginia Skyline, so I welcome you. I'm really glad to have you. And one of the things that I thought was interesting as I was looking through this was that these badges I do a lot of coding. The reason I wanted to do these badges is I do a lot of coding for my job. I have been a programmer in my lifetime, and not really so much an app developer per se, but done a lot of programming. And so I get really excited about badges like this. They are really interesting to me. But what I thought was interesting was the way that the Girl Scouts decided to put these 3 badges together and call it Coding for Good. And I thought, well, what does that really mean? And every time we've talked about one of these badges, I thought about, well, how can we use coding or app development or game development for really good things, to have good outcomes? And as I thought about it, I was thinking, well, with apps, there's a lot of really great apps that are very helpful to people. So for instance, like the American Red Cross has mobile apps like a first aid app, which I know I have on my phone because it's just, even though I'm certified in first aid, if I forget something, I've got it right there. So really interesting things you can do with apps, just like you can with other type of coding, to do good things for people. Another thing that is a really commonly used app that I use mine every single day is my weather app on my phone. And I expect most of you probably have a smartphone and probably have apps. So what I'd like to hear from you all now. You can unmute and just share with me, what are some apps you maybe use regularly that are really helpful? Anyone have any they want to share that are really helpful that they like?
My calendar.
Oh yeah, calendar. What else? Anybody else?
Zoom.
Zoom app? Yes, exactly. These days, that is really critical. Any other apps you all use?
Google Classroom.
Yeah, I bet. I bet a lot of y'all are probably using that a lot as you are probably working for school remotely. Any other apps you have that you like and are really helpful? Okay, well, there are a lot of them out there, obviously. There's lots of ones we use on a daily basis. There are lots of apps that we use to really help us in many different ways. And there may be some you don't even know about yet. They're out there that are really helpful. So later on today, we're really going to be blessed to have some ladies from a company called Willow Tree. Willow Tree Apps is a company located in Charlottesville, Virginia. And it is an app development company. And they actually create apps for lots of different companies you've heard of, like National Geographic and HBO and all sorts of companies. And so we're going to learn a little bit more about how they create apps and why companies create apps when we talk to them. And also just really, we can ask them a lot of questions about, like, if you listen to what we're talking about today and you think this is kind of interesting, I might want to pursue it further. I might want to learn more about app development, maybe become an app developer myself. You can ask them certainly questions about how did they get into the jobs that they have, what attracted them to these types of positions that they have. So they can probably also share with you lots of really cool apps that they have developed or know about, or things that they think are really helpful. So that'll be at the end of our presentation today. So to start off, with this particular badge, the first thing that we want to talk about, and I mentioned in the description, we're going to talk about a little bit about COVID today as well. I mean, it's a current situation we're dealing with, and I think we all can relate to some of the information. And I think this badge is really very, very appropriate for the situation we're going through right now in our country, in trying to understand how do we share something called community data. So what really does that mean, community data? Community data is basically data, it's just what it sounds like, that we collect from our community or data about our community. So I'll give you an example. In my neighborhood, I found out that the Department of Transportation, I live in Virginia, as I mentioned, the Department of Transportation here is going to change an intersection near my house. And I was curious as to why they were going to change it. And some of the data that I could get was I could go to the Department of Transportation and see things like how many accidents have happened at that intersection, how many people might have died at that intersection in an accident. So I can see lots of information about my community, but I can also gather information about my community. And so that is what we call community data. It's information about your community that is often collected from the people who are in your community. And we have a really big community data project going on nationwide this year. Can anyone guess what that community data project is that is going on right now this year? Anybody want to share?
The 2020 census.
That is correct. The 2020 census. That is an excellent example of how we collect community data. Now, just curious, does anybody know what the census really is? Can anyone tell me what it is? No takers? I'll tell you what the census is. So the census, and actually the Constitution of the United States set up the census. It is required by law that we have a census, and I'll ask you in a minute how often we have to have it. We're having one this year, and the census collects data about communities and the people in the United States. Believe it or not, I know it sounds maybe sounds crazy, but we actually can't always tell exactly how many people live in the United States because not everyone has, for instance, a social security number. Not everyone pays taxes. Not everybody has a job. So there's different ways we have to try and figure out how many people live in a community, and the census helps us do that. It's a very brief piece of information you have to give, and you were supposed to respond to the census to give this information to the federal government. Now, does anyone know how often that the government collects the census data?
If I recall correctly, it's every 10 years.
That is correct. Every 10 years, we go back and collect this data. And generally speaking, the census data doesn't change. The questions they ask don't change. Now, I just mentioned they're asking questions. Do you all know how the government uses the data they get from the census? They ask you these questions. How do they use this information that they gather? Do you know why we have to do it? I will share with you why. So the census data, as I mentioned, first and foremost, it helps us really understand how many citizens there really are in the United States and how many people live here. And actually, not just citizens fill out the census. Even if you're technically an illegal alien, you're supposed to fill out the census, which I think might be tough to get people to do because they might not want to self-identify in that way. But the census is designed to understand communities. And so what the federal government uses the census for is it helps to define what kind of funding, what kind of resources a particular community needs. So it's a very important survey because if we don't know who's in a community and what their needs might be, we might not give that community enough resources that it needs. And so the census is incredibly important. Now it goes on all year, so it doesn't happen just over a week or two. We take the entire year to collect that data. But now how do we collect census data? Does anyone know how the methods that they use to get this data? You probably have one at your house right now. It got mailed to you. So one way is through a paper survey. They send you in the mail. The other way is through a website. You can just go to census.gov and fill out the information there. You don't have to use the paper version. The other way, though, is just to remind people that they need to do the census, just so they can make sure they're trying to reach every single person. They actually have census workers who actually knock on doors and go door to door to remind people and try and get them to fill out the census. Now, the census is not a very long form. This is an example here of what the form looks like. It's only a handful of questions, and so it doesn't take even 5 minutes really to fill it out. It's very fast to fill it out. So the thing on the left there, the blue form, is basically what the census looks like, and it asks things like how many people live in your house, and Do you rent? Do you have an apartment? Do you live in a house? Do you live in a mobile home? Where do you live? How many more people live in your house other than just you? And do you have a telephone number? And so there's lots of very basic questions that they ask on the census to get an idea of how many people live in a community. As I mentioned, they also use a website. You can see the website is over to the right, and that's where you can just go ahead and fill it out really quickly. And like I said, it only takes a few minutes to finish. Only one person in your household needs to do it because they, as I mentioned, it asks how many people are in your household. And so ideally, you want to fill this out sometime during this year and make sure we get this information back so that the government has the information that they need. But one of the challenges with collecting community data is we want to make sure we want to reach everyone. And that's why I mentioned, like, in addition to mailing things to people, not everyone, believe it or not, has a mailing address. Some people don't. This has to include homeless people. Homeless people do not have a mailing address necessarily because they don't have a house to live in. So it has to include everyone. And so it can be a really daunting task to try and tackle ensuring that we get all of those numbers represented, that everyone's represented in the census. And many times when we collect community data, we do it through, as I mentioned, surveys. We just ask questions and get the information that we need. Now, there's other types of community data we might collect as well that might not involve surveys. In some cases, it might be automatic. So as an example, we have been talking a lot about COVID right now, and it's affecting all of us and having to stay at home and be safe. And you've probably heard of something called contact tracing, which is something that has been talked about quite a bit with COVID. And so what really does that mean? Contact tracing is collecting data from an infected individual. So if someone has COVID or has had it, collecting data from that person to basically trace or find out who else they might have been in contact with during the time frame when they were likely infectious. So why do you all think that would be an important thing for us to know right now with COVID? Anyone want to share? Well, one thing we know about COVID is it's pretty contagious, and we want to stop people from getting it. We want to prevent people from getting it as much as possible or treat them as quickly as we can. And so what contact tracing is designed to do is for us to understand when somebody who has it comes in contact with someone else, we know who else might have it, and we can control the spread a little bit. So that's what contact tracing is about. And you may have heard about Apple and Google creating what they were calling a contact tracing app. And so that's one of the reasons, that's one of the ways we've talked about, like, how do we do contact tracing? How do we stop the spread of this virus? Contact tracing through an app might be a really good way. And so Apple and Google stepped up and said, we're going to create an app. However, the challenge with their app is that it isn't really exactly contact tracing. Because what it does is it collects data about somebody who might have COVID, but it does not share location data. And so it will tell people, like, let's say I go to the grocery store and I did not know I had COVID. It was before I had any symptoms, but I did have it. And I went to the grocery store and I encountered 3 other people, like my cashier and people I passed on the aisleways. And so ideally, we would be able to get a message out to those people, and we would get a message to health officials to say, hey, there's a person who has COVID, who is tested now positive for COVID, who was in contact with these other people, and it would let the health department know so they could start to try and really stop the spread and try and get those people to quarantine. But unfortunately, this app that they're developing, because of Apple and Google's policies, they have privacy policies, they have decided that they will not they have very strict rules about this. They will notify someone, like if I was in the store and my husband, Tad, was in the store and I came in contact with him, it would notify him that he might have been in contact with someone who had it so that he could maybe get tested and be aware. But it won't tell the health officials, and it won't say like it happened in my local grocery store. So there's a limit to the value of this data. It's valuable for the individuals to know that they might be exposed to COVID, but it's not really helpful for contact tracing and helping the health department understand where these outbreaks might occur and so forth. So it's only kind of doing half the job of contact tracing. But, Apple and Google do make a really fair point. And it's something we have to think about when we collect community data in some way. And that is privacy. So there's a lot of data that we all have that is our personal data, right? And you can see some of it here, like your name, your address, where you live or where you have been, your health information in particular, your income, your cultural profile, maybe what religion you are, all of those particular things, all that is your own personal data. And you should have choices as to who you want to share that personal data with. And in these days, data privacy is a very big issue because people can use that data against you. So let me ask you all, why do you all think it might be important to protect your personal data from others?
Because someone can steal your identity.
They could absolutely steal your identity. Yep. Any other things y'all can think of? Well, I'll share with you something. Now, I want to just give you a little bit of background before we go to the next slide. So I'm actually a marketer by trade, and I own my own digital marketing agency. So I deal with data all day long. And I actually have a book coming out. I'm really excited. I have a book coming out in September called Data First Marketing. So I talk a lot about how we use data in the world of marketing. And in particular, data is very, very valuable to marketers and to other people. And let me just show you, this is a chart that I found. There was a study that was done by this security company, and this is the going average for how much someone is willing to pay for your data if you are in one of these categories. So kind of crazy here. Look, I mean, I'm a marketer. I do have 2 kids, but and I'm married. I have 2 kids. So maybe I'm not sure if I would be worth 4,000 US dollars for that data, but look at how much. Unmarried doctor, 5,000 US dollars. You can see the amounts in different countries that data would be worth. And the reason is in part, yes, someone could steal your identity. And obviously someone who's a doctor might have a higher income, and that would be a very valuable identity to steal. But also, we're talking about people who they want to influence you in some way. They want to sell you something. They want to influence you. And I'm going to tell you a little bit of a story now that is a true story that happened a few years ago, and show you kind of how bad data theft or lack of data privacy can be a problem. So just how bad can it get? This is probably one of the most scary stories about data privacy. And I just tell you this, I don't want to get too deep into it, but I do want to share this with you because I want you all to understand and know that if you're going to build an app in any way or gather community data, we have to have a responsibility to do it in a responsible way and protect that data. So has anyone ever heard of a company called Cambridge Analytica? No? It's okay. Y'all were a lot younger when this happened, and you probably don't remember it in the news. But it's something that affected me in a way because I work with Facebook and I do Facebook advertising. And so I was really interested in this story and what happened. In 2015 and 2016, there was a company called Cambridge Analytica that was operating out of England, and they were collecting community data via Facebook quizzes. And so I don't know how many of you might be on Facebook. I don't think it's probably as popular with your age group as it is with my age group, but um, with a lot of adults, Facebook is really popular. And it's very popular right now because a lot of adults like me are at home and it's a way to kill some time. But what I also see is a lot of people taking these quizzes on Facebook. And by the way, it's not just Facebook. It could be on any website, anywhere. It could be on any type of site that allows you to fill out a quiz. So I want to just share with you this word of caution. Basically, what happens when you fill out these quizzes, and this is a story from the Better Business Bureau, think twice before taking that Facebook quiz. Basically, Facebook quizzes and many other online quizzes are actually a way for companies like Cambridge Analytica to scam you into stealing your data and learning about who you are. And in fact, Cambridge Analytica as a company made all these Facebook quizzes and people would take them. Like, for instance, they would say, which Disney princess are you? Or which religion do you think you should be? You know, which one's most perfect for you? Or which Simpsons character are you most like? And people would take them and they would share them with their friends. The problem is that those Facebook quizzes are a way for them to collect data on you. You answer a series of questions, and when you answer those questions, they start to save that information with your name and your contact info, and they're able to learn a lot about you because you're volunteering the information. And so they're not stealing it. You're filling out the quiz, but you don't always realize that they're collecting this data about you on the other end. And what happened with Cambridge Analytica was they were able to actually get, they claim, 5,000 data points on every single American adult. That just sounds crazy. Like, I know myself and I use Facebook, and I can't even imagine what my 5,000 data points are. I can think of maybe 10 data points about myself. 5,000 data points they claim to have on every single American. And so they were able to use that to manipulate people in the way that they think through ads and so forth. And the story here is they were able to influence a lot of folks in the 2016 presidential election, as well as Brexit. You all may have heard of Brexit in the UK, where the United Kingdom is leaving the European Union. And they were able to influence a lot of people by learning this data. And Cambridge Analytica was directly related to this. They actually provided the data to make this happen. And they showed ads to people that would really make them emotional and frustrated and angry. And so when you get emotional, it's hard to have actual discourse. It's hard to have actual discussions that are meaningful. And so, as Time magazine said, the real story here is how personal data from social media is being used by companies to manipulate voters and distort democratic discourse. That's a really dangerous thing. And so Cambridge Analytica is no more. They have gone out of business for a couple of different reasons, mostly because they were in the UK. And in the UK, there are data privacy laws. We actually don't have any data privacy laws in the United States, which I think is a real problem, and we need to address that. But we do have some, they did have some in the UK, and so they were basically able to sort of shut down Cambridge Analytica. If you want to learn more about what happened during all of that, it's really fascinating. Like I said, I don't want to get too deep into it today, but they're on Netflix. There's a documentary about what happened. It's called The Great Hack. And it was excellent, and it was informative and really interesting to see how companies use this data against us to sometimes change our minds and to make us frustrated or angry or upset, so we'll act in a certain way. So highly encourage you to think about this. And I just want to again say, first of all, if you take nothing away from today, please don't take online quizzes and Facebook or otherwise. And number two, it's our responsibility when we build apps to do everything we can to protect the data that's in it, because people are trusting us with their data. So now I want to show you an example of something we call data visualization. I do this a lot with my job, and I want to show you two slides, and then I'd like for you to answer which ones you think are easier to read. So I'm going to show you the first one. They both have exactly the same data in both of these slides. Here's the first one. It is a table, you can see here, with lots of information in it. And then the second one is a graph. Now, which one was easier to read, the first one or the second one? Heidi, what do you think? Was the first one easier or the second one?
The second one.
Yeah. Anybody else want to share? What do you think? Was the first one easier to read or was the second one easier to read?
Second one.
Yeah. In fact, there are whole studies that say that when you take data and you put it into a visual method like this, when you use a chart, it's much easier for people to understand. And in this particular study we're looking at right here, this was actually an experiment that some folks, I believe it was at NYU, did. And they compared, they had groups look at both and decide which one was more meaningful for them, and they could learn from these graphs and this data and make decisions. And what they found was that people's minds were changed about this particular story that they did was, why do children play video games? Is it because they have violence, right? Like, why do kids play things like Call of Duty or another violent video game? And is it because they're violent kids? I want to get my anger out, or I like guns and weapons. Actually, no, that's not it at all. And they found that they were able to change people's attitudes because when they found out the real data that kids just really play these games because they're fun and they want to do something when they're bored or they're exciting, it's a challenge to figure things out. All of these other reasons, when they saw it graphically like this slide, their minds were changed. When they saw it in this type of format, their minds did not change. They still thought it was because kids had violent tendencies, and that's why they played violent video games. So what we know is that you're more likely to convince somebody of what you want to share with them and help them understand this data that you have when you make it graphical. And so this is really important for you all to think about. I will tell you a funny side story real quick about my niece. My niece is now 14 years old, and so she's right about y'all's age, and she wanted to stay home for the summer and not have to go to a camp or anything. She wanted to stay at home by herself. And both of her parents work, and they were like, I don't know how I feel about this. Well, she created a PowerPoint presentation for them with some data in it and showed them why they should support her decision. And eventually, when they were so impressed by it, eventually they came around and let her stay at home and do stay at home for the summer. You can make a big difference in your arguments or the things that you're trying to achieve. You can persuade people so much better when you use your data in a visual way. So I want to leave you with that today also, because you can use that in your daily life, not just in app development, but you can find ways, like my niece did, to visualize that data, to make it work to your advantage and get people to be persuaded by the data that you have. So when we talk about data visualization, data visualization is, again, graphical representation of data. And some of you have probably seen a lot of this going around right now, especially again with COVID. This is what our data visualization looks like from the Virginia Department of Health. Every day they update this graph, and you can see they have the number of confirmed cases, probable cases, and they keep an average. And you can see, thankfully, in Virginia, we're starting to see a downslope, which is good. And so that yellow line, we're kind of coming over the hump, and that's really good. So that's one way. Another way people visualize data, this is what we call a column chart. You can see it's got columns on it, but it also has a line graph. That yellow line is a line graph on it, and that's another way to show data. Here's another way. You can use maps. This is really helpful because if you think about it, if you think about how people are thinking about COVID right now, like I'm thinking about, is it near me? Is it near my house? Is it in my neighborhood? And I can see by looking at this map of Virginia and all of the counties and they're color coded, I can see how many cases there are near me and in other places, so I can get a better idea of where the outbreaks are right now. So this is another great way to represent data, is by just using maps to represent our data as well. Now, something kind of fun you guys can try also is there's a tool called Google Trends. And Google Trends represents how many searches are being done on Google at a specific time, during a specific time frame. And so I was doing some searches recently and I thought, wouldn't it be funny to see, y'all probably have experienced this in your own house, that we were all worried about how we're going to get enough toilet paper for our house. And so I thought, well, let me just see when that surge of people looking for toilet paper was. And I can go to it's called Google Trends. You can go to trends, TRENDS, .google.com, and you can put in any search term, and you can see I've changed it to United States, and I've got the past 90 days, and you can see, sure enough, that surge of searches for toilet paper, huge surge, back in middle of March is when everybody was worried about getting toilet paper, and there seemed to be a shortage. And now it's starting to level off again and get back to normal levels. So hopefully that means everybody's getting enough toilet paper in their house. But these are really interesting to look at. And I use these types of graphs and data visualizations all the time in the type of work that I do, so I can understand what the demand is in marketing. And is there a demand on certain types of products? And I can see what the demand shows in Google by how people are searching. So this is a really neat tool you can use. And again, it's at trends, TRENDS, .google.com. Now, when we collect data, we often will put it in a computer. So like data visualizations, and we have databases, right, that we will collect this data and put it in and hold that data. We also will create data objects. And data objects, what are they exactly for a computer? A data object is a kind of container that computers use to store data and information. So if we create an app, we're going to create data objects. Now, we're not going to actually create an app today on the computer, but what I do want to do is I want to take a little bit of time here, maybe let's say the next 20 minutes or so. We can reconvene at 5 o'clock. I want you to think about collecting community data to make an app. Now, we've talked about a few things here today, and I want you to think about answering the following questions. And I'm going to leave this slide up so that you all can refer to it as you're working on this. If you don't have a pen and paper, feel free to go get one, or you can do it on your own computer. You don't have to have pen and paper. If you have a computer, you can type on. But you want to answer these questions. Number one, if you create an app, what's the purpose of your app? Number two, what kind of community data will you need to collect, right? Who do you need to get it from? And then how will you collect this data? And remember that not all people have the same access. Not everyone, for example, has internet access or Wi-Fi. So how can you ensure, based on the type of information you need to collect, that you actually have collected everything that you need? What kinds of questions do you need to ask, right? And so write some of those down. And are there data privacy concerns? Is the data that you have going to have somebody's name with it, like Janet Miller is a mom of two? Or is it just going to be anonymous, like a mom of two lives at this address or in this community? And then how will you communicate that data? How will you share out that data through your app, or how will you visualize it? So we're going to take a few minutes to go ahead and do that. And like I said, we will go ahead and meet back here at 5 p.m., which is in about 20 minutes. So I'll give you about 20 minutes to work on that. If you finish early, no worries. Take a little break, go get us something to drink, whatever you need, and then just come back at 5 p.m. And then we're going to share the types of apps that you all were thinking about developing. And I want to hear all the great ideas you have. And then at 5:30 or around that time, our app developers are going to come in and they're going to talk to us about their jobs and what they do in app development. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and mute myself. And if y'all have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat box, or you can just unmute yourself. I'll be sitting here. I'll answer it for you. But let's go ahead and think about what kind of app we might want to create and how we would need to use that community data to do so.
Excuse me?
Yes, Grace.
What do you mean by how will we communicate the data?
So how will you share the data back out? So for instance, if you have an app that is collecting community data, how do you plan to share it back out with other people? So it could be that you're going to do it through the app, or you could share it visually with charts. How are you going to communicate the data back to people who need to see it?
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, we'll take about 5 more minutes, everybody. Okay, everyone. Is everybody back? Let's go ahead and start sharing some of the ideas you had of your apps and how you plan to communicate your data and how you're going to collect your data. So would anyone like to go first? Come on, I'd really love to hear about your apps. Is there anyone who would like to share theirs first?
Mine is for community activities.
Awesome. And so how would you collect that data for your community activities? That's great, like a community calendar type of thing?
Yeah, and we would place posters at the post office and talk about it at our borough meetings.
Okay, excellent. And then how would people get access to that data?
I wanted to make posters and write on it like where you can find it, like on the App Store, Google Play.
Yeah, excellent. And so they could download the app and then get all of the information?
Yeah.
Excellent. Now, what about data privacy concerns? Did you have any thoughts about, like, was there any particular data that you'd be concerned about in that type of app needing to be protected?
Like people having their last names, emails, and phone numbers, try to keep them private
That's a
and
good
not be
idea.
posting about it.
Yeah,
Or
absolutely.
their addresses.
Yeah, absolutely. And so what types of questions would you need to ask someone if they were going to put something on your community calendar?
What the activity is, who's going to host it, and what time and place.
Yeah, perfect. And then I guess how we communicate the data is also through the app. Is that what you're thinking? Like they download the app and they can see what the events are coming up.
It can be on the app, put posters at our post office, and talk about it at our monthly borough meetings.
Excellent. That's great. Thank you, Chloe. That was excellent. Does
Thanks.
anyone else want to share their app? I'd love to hear about some other ideas. I'll have to call on people if y'all don't volunteer. Well, let's just go down the line. Ariana, do you have an app that you would be interested in sharing? How about Cecilia? Cecilia, do you have an app you'd be interested in sharing with us? How about Emma? Emma, what kind of app did you come up with? Don't forget y'all are muted too, so if you're trying to say something, you might be muted. How about Grace? Grace, what app did you think about?
Well, I'm not totally sure, but I'm thinking maybe one where it would have all like different people that work as doctors or different things, and you would find the best place to get the best service you need.
I see. For like whatever condition you're feeling, you can find the doctor that would be the best fit for you?
Yes.
Excellent. And so what kind of community data would you need to collect to make an app like that?
I guess you would find out from other people what doctors they go to.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe what
If
that
doc-
doctor specializes in. You could find out the doctors. And then, if somebody's looking for a doctor, you'd have to ask them certain questions, right? You'd have to find out some kind of personal information because, like let's say I have a really personal health issue, that I don't want to share with a lot of people. That's pretty private stuff, but you'd have to ask them certain questions, I guess, to probably match them with a doctor, right?
Yes.
Yeah. How would you protect that data? What are your thoughts on how you would protect it?
Well, I'm not really sure how. There would have to be some sort of privacy settings That would make it so only the people that need to see it can see it.
Yeah, that's a good point. So that it doesn't get out to more people. Google, as an example, has a lot of data about us. If you have an Android phone, Google knows me. I have an Android phone. It knows where I'm at all times, but it doesn't share that data. Like I was talking about before with the COVID contact tracing app they were thinking about creating or they're working on, they won't share that with other people. So, especially they're really stringent about not sharing that data with the government because they're afraid that the government might misuse data like that. So that's a really good point. Like you can hold on to some data like that, but you have to be very careful about who you're going to share it with because you don't want any bad actors, as they call it, like people who would use that data in a malicious way potentially. And how would you communicate the data? Like if I'm looking for a doctor, how would you communicate back to me which doctor met my needs based on the information I put in? Would you do that through the app?
I guess yes.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's very good. I think that's a great idea. It helps people find doctors that are close to them probably too, that could be a good fit for them. And you could even do things like personality, like maybe you like a female doctor over a male doctor. I know like for certain things, I like to go to a female doctor just I feel more comfortable with that. Or you might say like, I like a doctor with a good sense of humor that is funny. Maybe I don't. Maybe I like a doctor who's serious, so it could be either way. You could find out what kind of doctor this person is and what their personality is like, and if they're maybe the type of doctor you would like to have. And that's a really neat idea. All right. How about Heidi? Heidi, what kind of app did you have in mind?
I was thinking of some kind of like library app where people could like recommend books.
Oh, cool. Yeah. Okay. Like maybe they've read something and it's really interesting and they want to just tell everybody, hey, this is a great book. You should read it.
Yeah.
So how would you collect that community data? What kind of data would you need to collect? And then how would you collect it?
Could you define like community data again?
Yeah, so community data is the data you're going to use in your app. It's basically data that's from the people in our community. So a library app is a perfect example of that because our community uses the library. So if I've read a book as an example, or multiple people have read books, how would we give you the information we needed for this app to tell you, yes, we liked it, or no, we didn't, or we'd recommend it, or we wouldn't recommend it?
Uh,
I will tell you there's an app similar to this. It's actually more of a website, but I think you can download an app too. It's called Goodreads, Reads. And that's an app that people go up and they say on this app whether or not they liked a particular book or recommend it, and they rate it. So that's one way you could do it. You could say, like, people can go onto the app and they can say, I checked this book out from the library. I really liked it, or I didn't like it. Thumbs up or thumbs down. Or you can give it like a star rating, like out of 5 stars, I'd give it 4 out of 5 stars.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was thinking of like different categories with like number scales. So like out of 10.
Yeah. So, and they could fill out a survey or some way to say, hey, this is how I rate it.
Yeah.
What other kinds of questions do you think you need to ask? Do you feel like you need a whole lot of personal data on this one? Or do you feel like
Not
it's sort of anonymous?
probably like what your age range is.
That's a good point. That's a really good point because maybe someone in a particular age range, let's say it's a kid's book, and you guys are too old to maybe appreciate little kids' books anymore. You want to read something that's more in your age range or more an adult genre. And I could see you saying maybe like Hop on Pop is not one that you guys would probably recommend anymore because your age range isn't the age range for that book. But maybe something like The Hunger Games or other more or Harry Potter even. I think people appreciate Harry Potter even into adulthood. Might be more appropriate for an age range. That's really good. And then you could find people who are like you, right? You could maybe
Yeah.
say, how are girls who are in 9th and 10th grade in high school, what do they like to read? What do they recommend?
Mhm.
So are there any other data privacy concerns you would have with collecting that data?
I don't think so. I don't think we would need to collect their names.
Yeah, you could probably make it pretty anonymous. That's great.
Yeah.
And would I go and get the app to understand, to either rate the books and also get the ratings to see which books are the best ones?
Yeah, I think so.
That's great. Well, Heidi, that's a great idea. Thanks for sharing.
You're welcome.
Jackie, want to share with us what your app was?
Hi, it's actually my daughter Gabby that was
Okay.
working on it.
Hi, Gabby.
She's double booked right now. She's working on a school project, but she wrote me notes, so I'm gonna try to read what she wrote.
Okay.
She's very interested in animals, so she wanted to do some kind of app, like a pet caregiver app. And she said she would look for, I guess, families, maybe like post flyers at veterinarian offices, like at vets. If she could post like a flyer to see who needs like a caregiver, whether it's like for the day or for like the weekend or something like that. And then she would ask them questions like, well, if is it a dog or a cat, or what breed, the ages, if it's a puppy or, if it's an adult dog. And then what services were needed, like if they needed dog sitting or if they needed someone to walk them for exercise, if they needed them to be fed, or if they have any special needs or special diet. She'd find what kind of breed it is too.
Excellent.
And let's see. And then for the privacy, she wasn't sure. She just said that she would ask just like the person's name, the first name, and maybe last initial. And I think, she might post it on local social media, maybe like Nextdoor or something like that. So it's just local. It's not all over. So like if she was trying to find, like, to match a caregiver to a pet or something, it would be somewhere local.
So it'd be something in your neighborhood more than like,
Right.
if you put it on Facebook, it would go to everybody around the world who is friends with you on Facebook.
Right.
Yeah. That's great. And what about any data privacy concerns? Did she have any thoughts on that?
No. So, I guess she was just thinking, since it would be maybe like through veterinarian offices, it would be like the people that bring their pets there. She wasn't sure how to do that. She just didn't know. She didn't want, like, to give all their information. I guess maybe once they found like a match, who, then you wouldn't, you would give the address, because you'd have to go to their house and pet sit them, but you wouldn't want that, known to everybody.
That's true. Yeah, that's a good point. And I'll just add to this, y'all, that there are some cybersecurity badges. There are 3 of them at the senior level now. And if you haven't worked on cybersecurity badges yet, they have them at every level. Like cadets had them last year. We worked on some cybersecurity last year, my cadet troop. But I will add that that's a really good badge set. If you are going to be doing apps or you're interested in this or interested in this data and how to store it, cybersecurity is a really big up and coming field. And in fact, they need a lot of women in it, frankly. There's a lot of men. There's a lot of men app developers too, as our guest speakers will probably tell you. But it's an area where there's a lot of need for being able to protect this data. And so there's a lot of opportunity out there. And Ariana says she did all 3 cybersecurity badges. Excellent. Because they're really helpful. And also it can kind of teach you a little bit about how to protect your own data. Because like we were talking about, your data is very valuable. And you don't want it like sold on the black market or anything like that. And as you all are approaching adulthood, it's very important for you to think about how your data is being used, because as I mentioned, there are no data privacy laws in the United States. There are none, which is really shocking. And maybe we'll all make that happen, because honestly, it can be very scary to think about how your data could be used in some ways against you in a negative way. So that's not a positive thing. Thanks, Jackie. Thanks, Gabby. How about Quinn? You want to share with us, Quinn, what your app was?
Hi, so I was thinking something similar to the person who was doing like the app for books. My idea was like people to get ideas for like what anime they should watch next.
Oh, very cool.
And for what kind of data it would collect, it would just like collect what animes that people have watched
Okay.
and like what they have and haven't gotten through, like if they stopped midway because they didn't like it.
Mm-hmm. Kind of like what Netflix does with like, other things you might like because you watched this other show. Have you
I
ever
don't
seen
have
that?
Netflix, so I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's kind of neat. Yeah, they do something similar. If you watch a particular show, it'll tell you, hey, it's very funny though, because when my kids were little and they were using my Netflix account, I kept getting stuff for like little kids. So it would recommend things like, because you like Dora the Explorer, maybe you'll also like, this princess movie or something. It was really kind of funny, but yeah, it uses that same kind of idea of what you have watched, so they assume you probably would like something similar to that. And that's a great idea.
Thank you. And then I would collect this data through the app, and I would like get the app like out there by advertising it possibly on like popular services that like people watch anime on.
Okay. Excellent.
The questions that I would ask are just like what animes have you watched? How far have you gotten through them? Did you like it or did you not like it?
Excellent.
I don't think that there would be data privacy concerns. Like the only thing I could think of is like if people made accounts on it, then I would probably have them put like their phone number or email. But I think that would be it.
Yeah. Yeah, and really, the less information you have to collect to get the information you need is probably better, because that's less information that can potentially get leaked if something does happen, if there's a cybersecurity attack or something. So that's a really good point. Like maybe I just take just what I need to communicate with them and not everything. Because you could ask them anything, but do you need to know that information?
Yeah.
And then,
what? And then to communicate the data, I would just have it something that's just like, you watch this, maybe you could watch this next, like other people enjoyed this too.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's great. Thanks for sharing, Quinn.
Thank you.
And Taylor, can you share with us what your app was?
I would do something about with school news and like what's going on within school and stuff, because I know there's like social media and stuff, but like I feel like if it was specifically an app, the information would be able to like get through to people better with like notifications or like whatever.
That's excellent. Yeah, and really, your high school is a community, right? In itself, it's its own community. So that's a great way to think about community data. So what kind of community data would you need to collect then, and how would you collect it?
Like you could collect like teacher news, like what's going on with like the teachers and like what information they want to put out, or like ASB and like student council, like events and stuff. And you can like collect it through like the app and like the people pretty much.
And then what kind of data privacy concerns might you have with collecting data through an app for high school students?
I don't really think there would be any privacy concerns, really. Just if like the app got like hacked or something,
Yeah.
like by like the wrong hands, or like someone got a hold of it and like started putting out like other information that wasn't supposed to like be out.
Yeah. Yeah, and that would be important because, like, so again, cybersecurity, really important part of this because, if you think about it, the information on it might have some information about the high school student. And we want to be sure we protect people who are under 18, who are not adults yet, and we protect their data because you all are still minors, and we want to make sure your safety is not at risk in some way. So, yeah, cybersecurity, I think, comes into play there again. We want to make sure there's nobody hacking into it. But if you've got a good, solid plan, then you should be pretty good. And then how would the data get out? Like the news, does it alert you? Does it have a notification? How does it get out to everybody? Through the app?
The person would probably have to like turn on the notifications like every other app, and then it would like just send it to their like phone or like email.
Cool. Great job, Taylor. Thanks for sharing.
Thank you.
Let me get back to I see Alexis is on. Alexis, did you have an app that you had created? Let me go back to Ariana. Ariana, did you have an app you created? No. Cecilia, do you have an app you want to share? Well, I think our guest speaker is actually one of our guest speakers is coming in right now. So let me see if this is her. I think it's going to, Kathy has come in. All right. Hi, Kathy, welcome. And we'll just give it a couple minutes. If anyone needs to take a restroom break or anything in the meantime, we can go ahead and do that for a few minutes while we wait for our guest speakers to come in to the app and to the GoToMeeting app. So if y'all need to take a restroom break or get a drink of water or anything, please feel free to do that. Let's take maybe 5 minutes. It's currently 5:23 p.m. My time. So let's come back at just before 5:30. And then we'll get started with our guest speakers, okay? Everyone did a great job on that activity. Thanks for doing that.
As we're waiting, I have a question.
Go right ahead.
What steps or parts of this badge will we complete?
You'll finish the entire badge today.
That's wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. It's a little odd to me because my daughter Emma is on this call, and I just heard you, Emma, walk in the hallway, and I heard this echo of myself. It was a little weird to hear. So Chloe asked me if there will be any other senior badges offered. If any of you missed the coding badges, I do have one of them recorded that you can watch. That is the mobile game development badge. And if you're interested in me sending you that, it's on my private YouTube channel, just to protect privacy. So if you would like me to email you that link after this call, I will be, or actually I can give it to you right now if you're interested. I'll go pull it out and y'all can watch that one. I have been considering doing the first one, coding basics. Again, I did not record that one. So if you're interested in that, let me know and I will let my counsel know, and I'll be happy to put that one on again. It's pretty straightforward. And in all of these that I've been doing, I try and make sure that we can earn the entire badge in one session. They are about 2 hours, but we do earn the entire badge during that time. And oh, okay, here is the link to the recorded one. This is the mobile app developer one. Like I said, it's about 2 hours. Again, we have a break where we do some activities. And so we have about a 20-minute break here and there where you're working on that activity and then you come back. But one thing that's really cool about that one is we had a guest speaker on that one as well. And he was a game developer for Animal Crossing, the most recent version of Animal Crossing, New Horizons, and he's also worked on Minecraft. So we had a really interesting discussion with him about like how you become a mobile game developer and what that entails. Is really fascinating. Some of the challenges that they run into. So that is the link I just put. Oh, I think I just put that to Chloe. Let me let me put this to everyone here quickly. There's the link, everybody, to the private one, and you can see that one. I will talk to my counsel about putting out the coding basics, and I will email you all about that. Yeah, Ariana was there. I remember you being there, Ariana. Thanks for coming to that. So I will put that coding basics one out. I'm happy to do another one and record it, and then that way everybody can come and see it. Well, I'm excited to say, I hope everybody's back from their bathroom break / water break. I'm happy to say our guest speaker has just arrived. Joanna, I'm going to try and say your name, and I hope I don't mess it up. Joanna Lingenfelter, is that how you pronounce your last name? You can unmute yourself, Joanna, if you want.
Sorry, it wasn't letting me. My last name is Lingenfelter. We actually, I think, are going to have a couple of different people from my team on here as well, just to get some different perspectives on different roles that people have in kind of app development. So,
excellent. Yeah. Thank you so much. I want to thank you and everyone who's going to come today. I'm really excited to have you all here. So, as I mentioned to you all, Joe works for a company called Willow Tree Apps. It's based here in Charlottesville, Virginia. And I've known this company for a long time here. They're a fantastic group of people. They worked with me on a couple of badges in the past. And fantastic group of ladies who are going to join us who their job is app development. So they're doing what we're talking about today. So I wanted you all to be able to talk to some ladies who do this, who have made this their career, so you can learn all about it. You can ask them any questions you want about, how did they become app developers? What attracted them to this job? What do they like about the job? Because if some of the things we've talked about today, and y'all have had super creative ideas for some apps, but if you all think this could be something you're interested in and you'd like to pursue it, they can give you lots of great advice. And I think that they're going to be really, really helpful for that. So, Joe, why don't I hand it over to you? Do you all want to introduce yourselves on your team and just tell everybody a little bit about yourselves? Joe, are you speaking? Because I can't hear you. I heard you before. Oh, she left. Maybe she'll come back. I see Carly is on also. I know Carly also works for Willow Tree. Hi, Carly. How are you doing?
Hi, I'm doing great. How are you all?
Good. Thanks for joining.
Can you hear me? Okay.
And is Muriel also on your team?
Yes, she is.
And maybe Kate Oliver. I see Kate has come in.
Yes. I also work with Joe at Willow Tree.
Awesome. So hopefully Joe will be coming back in. Maybe she just lost connection. So we can kick it off and just talk a little bit. Maybe you all could tell us a little bit about what type of job you have at Willow Tree and what a little bit of background about yourselves to introduce yourselves to the girls.
Muriel, Kate, would go first? I don't want to just start.
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, go ahead, Carly. Okay. My name is Carly. I have worked at Willow Tree for the last 3.5 years. I'm a software test engineer. So I would work really closely with one of the software engineers that we have here. And once they kind of build out what the app, I'm gonna turn my camera on too. I'm so used to having my camera on. And once they have built the functionality and the features in an app, it gets handed over to me to make sure everything is working correctly and that I can't get it to crash or get anything weird to happen in it. So I do some coding in my job. I write some automated scripts that will open the app once it's been built. You can be used correctly. And this is actually my second career. I went to school for math and thought that I was going to work in finance and healthcare, and that just ended up not being my passion. But something that I did have to do while I was working in finance was build models and spreadsheets and presentations, and those things were supposed to work. Something that's translated really well into tech. So that's me.
Awesome. Kate,
do you want to go?
Or Joe, do you want to share about yourselves and your background?
Sure, I can get going. So my name is Kate Oliver, and I have a slightly different role at Willow Tree. I am a technical requirements manager, which essentially means that I work with our clients. We work with different companies to help them build and deliver really cool technology, and I work with them to kind of figure out what it is they want, what it is they need, and then make that come to fruition by breaking down business objectives. We want to be able to have a new account opened in under 5 minutes, and break that down into actionable technical requirements that our developers can then pick up and run with. So I spend a lot of time going back and forth between our clients and our development teams on site, and just making sure that everyone's really on the same page about what it is that we're building, what it is we're trying to accomplish, and then kind of solving problems that pop up along the way, removing blockers from developers like Muriel and Joe from getting the work done. I do actually have a background as a developer. Prior to coming to Willow Tree, I worked for about 3 years as a
web developer building financial software. And that experience I really do leverage in my job. It does really help me to have that technical background so that I can ask the right questions and, try to solve problems preemptively, or, take a peek in the code when talking with developers to kind of, make sure that I'm on the same page and, I'm not setting them up to be in a bad situation. So I have a little less of a technical job now, but I definitely rely on that experience. So maybe Muriel, I'll hand it off to you.
Sure, yeah. So like Carly and Kate already kind of explained, so I'm a software engineer, which means that I code, in my case, for iOS apps, but we do multiple different things at our company. And like they already said, I very heavily depend on them and their roles to make sure that I can do my job in a good way and that I do a good job at what I do. So typically I will get kind of tickets, which is really kind of an assignment or a chunk of work that I want to get done from Kate. I saw that Lauren also just joined. So both of them actually I've worked with pretty closely the last 6 months or so. And then I'll do the coding for it. And it's pretty common for me to miss things. So then I hand it off to a test engineer who finds ways to break it and show me what I missed, and then I can go back and fix it. Yeah.
I can go. So I do essentially the same thing as Muriel, but I guess my entry into this sector is slightly kind of interesting because I majored in Italian studies in college, very practical life choices. I, after college, didn't exactly know what I was going to do next. And I had read and heard that, quote unquote, anyone can learn to code. So I decided to see if that was true and kind of ran an experiment on myself. And so I learned with videos and books, and it was about 2.5 years of independent studying. And then I got a job. I have been at a couple of different companies, and I'm at WillowTree, and that's my favorite place I've been so far. Lauren, do you want to go?
Yeah, sure. So like Joe, I had a little bit of a non-traditional entry into this field. I'm actually a classics major, which is an ancient Greek and Latin major. Went to UVA, came out of college, anticipating going to law school, and law school wasn't great to go into because of the recession at the time. So ended up working as like a data analyst for the Federal Transit Administration on working with public transit. And then from there kind of got involved more with databases and database administration. And then slowly over time kind of ended up through working with another company at WillowTree and working more in like project management, and then doing the same thing that Kate does, technical requirements management, just to kind of get all the information we need to complete the work, building that relationship with the client and making sure that we're helping our team complete everything and that they have all the information that they need when they need it. So that's pretty much it.
Excellent. Well, thank you, all of you, for joining us today. I really appreciate it. This is so helpful for us to be able to talk to people who are doing this in their profession and really learn a little bit more about what it entails and really understand, like, it's interesting also to hear your backgrounds. Like some of you, like Joe has said, like she didn't start off in app development, but she's really happy in it now. Maybe she learned it later. So it's interesting because I think these young ladies are all in high school. They're all 9th and 10th graders. And so they're going to be considering pretty soon, where they want to go to college and what they may want to do. And I think it's important for them to hear things like, hey, you know what? I could choose a particular path and decide, you know what? That may not actually, after college, be the thing I want to do. I'm going to go and I can still learn again and continue. That's a great thing about app development and anything with programming. Like y'all said, you can learn it online. You can teach yourself in a lot of ways. And you can change your whole career, which is awesome. It's great to see you guys were able to do that. Some of you who were definitely doing that. Girls, do you have any questions you want to start out with for the Willow Tree team? Feel free to unmute yourself and just ask. Y'all don't have to be shy. It's okay. And if you're shy about asking a question, it's okay. You can also type it in the chat box and I'll ask for you if you feel you are a little shy about asking. Why don't I go ahead, since I don't see any questions just yet, why don't I go back to the Willow Tree team and ask you, like, what do you think is the most exciting thing about what you do? Is it the types of apps you create, or is it the environment of being an app developer? What do you really like best about the job that you work in?
I have kind of a different perspective on coding, so I'll share this a little bit. I don't care so much about the technology aspect of it myself so much. My background is linguistic, and that's the way that I connect with code. It's very much just like puzzles and solving little problems, and then learning new new techniques to solve those problems, and that's what I like to do the best.
I think it's kind of an interesting field because it's always changing. It's never going to be the same. So that's kind of that built-in challenge. And then also we are really fortunate at Willow Tree that we work with a lot of, well-known partners. So we get to work with people that maybe usually smaller companies like us wouldn't work with. Like we're fortunate to work, on an app that streamed the Super Bowl that was viewed by millions of people. So that's pretty cool.
That is really cool.
Yeah, I think for me, it's similar to Lauren, the work we do is always changing. There's always something new going on in technology. And I think the thing that's really beautiful about a career in technology is kind of the ability to do such different things throughout the sector. In my previous job, I was working in finance as a developer. Now I've worked with financial services companies, broadcasting companies, both consumer and internally facing, so software for a company's employees to use. And so you just really get to see so many different things. And there's so many different ways that you can go with it depending upon what it is that you're interested in. And you can kind of really become an expert in a section of that field. I also, just built into the way that software operates, we're trying to always improve upon the way that we're doing work. And like slowly iterating to make our processes better and deliver faster and higher functioning software and improve on the relationships with the people we work with. That's just kind of built into the way that we work in software. And so I think that aspect of not just settling for the way something's always been done, but looking for a better way to do it every 2 weeks, makes going to work kind of exciting. So
yeah.
Yeah, my experience is pretty much what I like most about my experience so far is pretty much what everyone has already said. I actually started off in college as a mechanical engineering student, and then I saw a presentation or a panel of computer science students, and one of them mentioned something about how she had a really short attention span and how computer science is a really good field for her for that reason, because everything's moving so quickly and she'll never be stuck kind of doing the same thing every day for years. And that really resonated with me because I also have a very short attention span and I tend to kind of get bored or I don't know, just space out. And so this is a really good thing for me to work on because every day I start my day knowing I'm going to code, but not knowing how I'm going to do it yet or what I'll have to do. And kind of like Joe said, it's all sort of individual small puzzles. And every time you figure something out, it's a really cool experience. And then every time it's kind of a more difficult one, you can kind of get really into it. So it's something that I've always, solving puzzles, that is. I didn't have any coding experience before college, but solving puzzles of various kinds is something that I've always really enjoyed. So it was really cool once I realized that I could do it for a living every day.
Every day. And there's always a new challenge. That's awesome.
Mhm.
So are there any apps? I did send the girls before our call today, I sent them a link to the sort of portfolio of different apps that Willow Tree has created. It's like a case studies page. Are there any particular apps that you all have worked on that you were particularly proud of or you thought were really cool that you want to share with us?
Sure. I'm not sure that most people would find this cool, but I was working on for about a year ago for a good chunk of time. I was working on a piece of software for a financial services company, and it was essentially software so that bank employees, account management representatives, customer service reps, could have access to an insane amount of financial data. And that they need to do their jobs. They're filling out all of these forms, they're helping customers who call on the phone. Some of these accountants are doing really high level operations with like very nitty gritty accounting information. And for me, it sounds a little boring, and at a surface level it was, but we were essentially helping them redesign and rebrand this application. And what was really cool about that is, in my position, I had to learn a ton really quickly about accounting, and so that we could really take the data that they were presenting and find a better way to present it to the users. And in what we were trying to do, we were making hopefully at some point making the jobs of those folks a lot easier, instead of having 6 clicks to get to the piece of information they need every day and having like a textbook of how to operate this software. We were really striving to make that much more intuitive, and in that I had to learn a lot about something that I never thought I'd know. So that was really exciting for me, and it was just a really tough challenge to go to dig through something so specific to a sector that I'm unfamiliar with, learn all of that, and then try to improve the user experience. It was a cool challenge, and something I look back on, and it was a cool growth opportunity and something I never thought I'd do.
That's great.
Kind of similar to the finance aspect of that. I guess my first 2 years at Willow Tree, I was on the same project, which is not super common. Usually people switch around after 6 months to a year or so. But I was building, or I was part of a team of at first 3 and then later grew to 6, building an iOS app for personal banking. And we actually interacted with that system that Kate just mentioned at times. Or with the company at least, and it was really cool because we got that project before this bank had an app at all. So we got to start from scratch essentially and build this really big banking app that people can now use to transfer money and open accounts and do all sorts of things with. So as a new college hire at the time, it was really cool to see kind of like that first file being created, and then 2 years later having an app that I actually use for my personal banking now.
Oh, that's awesome.
So that's pretty cool.
So
it was really cool once I had to.
As a user, do you like the app you created?
So I do. I might be biased, because I built it for 2 years. But at some point I had to reset my password and I had to call the customer service for it, and it was a really funny experience to be walked through this app that I built every day by someone who's like, oh yeah, this is like, you can do all these really cool things with it. I'm like, yeah, I know. I remember when we made that.
I kind of know.
So that was really cool.
Yeah. I know how cool it is. I'm a cool person. I did a great, cool thing. Yeah. That's awesome. That's great. Lauren?
Since I've been at Willow Tree, which has been, I guess, like 8 or 9 months, I've only worked on one project. But I will say it's like kind of nice to work on an app that, again, like streamed the Super Bowl, which was the largest, amount of people to ever stream an event on planet Earth, like in all time. So that was pretty cool. And then also it's kind of nice having like worked on a lot of different things that are very obscure and people don't know. It's kind of nice to work on something where it's like, oh yeah, like I've used that before. My friends use that. Like, yeah, so that's pretty cool.
That's awesome. Carly or Joe, or do you have any that you want to share that maybe you worked on you thought were really special, that you really enjoyed?
My connection is really bad, so I don't know if you can hear me particularly well. But actually, Lauren and I started on the same day, and we've been on the same project since we started. But before I was at WillowTree, one of the companies I was at, we built an app for kind of a revolutionized department stores. The idea is with like smartphone interactivity, and the idea was to be able to use the app to ask for help and do online orders and stuff like that directly from the store. So it was pretty cool. It was a lot of location service stuff, and the interesting thing too is like there's so much of this stuff that has to be done physically. It's not just software. Like we had to go and we had to measure things and figure out the angles and how we were going to be able to get the location proximity as close to as possible to the actual person.
Wow.
So that was a pretty cool experience.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I had a question from Jackie, who is on the call today. She wanted to know, were any of you all Girl Scouts growing up?
I was.
Awesome.
But I was only a brownie. So
No, but I so desperately wanted to be a brownie. It's all I wanted when I was like 6. So when Joe said that we were going to be talking to some Girl Scouts, and I was like, heck yeah.
Yeah, you'd be impressed at the fact that Girl Scouts now has all these STEM badges. And we were just talking actually earlier about, we have a whole cybersecurity set of badges at every level of Girl Scouts, even down to kindergartners. And as we were talking today, and we talked a lot about community data and data collection, and how we have a responsibility, if we're going to create an app, to make sure we try and protect user data. And several of you mentioned working on, especially on financial apps. That's highly sensitive personal data. What types of challenges or things do you all have to think about when you think about the privacy, or is that something that's really something your client has to think more of, or do you have to really put some privacy settings inside of apps to help protect that data?
Yeah, so it's interesting working with clients, since at the end we aren't the owner of the software, so we can advocate for something as much as we want, but sometimes we get overruled in the final analysis. But yeah, when you're working on financial software, there's obviously a lot that you have to take into account. It's highly sensitive data, and particularly on my last project, since basically I was creating software that anyone at a bank could access. There were several things that we did with that. We weren't working on the back end of the software, so kind of securing that data from a data management perspective wasn't necessarily our focus, but we essentially were creating entitlements bands. So if you were a customer service representative, you probably shouldn't be able to see someone's full account number, or you might not be able to see their account number and their routing number so that you can make transfers, or their full social security number, just the last 4 digits. So we kind of would, and also since a lot of these screens are visible by others who might not have the role that you do, a lot of the data was hidden behind a click to reveal for some of our more sensitive data, and then just being really careful with practices when going between the server and the front end is something you got to take into consideration. But we're also starting to see a lot of our clients react to these consumer privacy laws in California. With our clients that have any international footprint, we have to take into consideration GDPR, which essentially is Europe's Consumer Privacy Act, where the user can opt out of letting the company sell their personal data, which a lot of apps do collect and do a lot with your data. So just know that most companies, there's some hidden preference where you can opt out of letting them sell that now. So a lot of our teams have been having to start to deal with that as well.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, for the girls on the call, you may not know what GDPR is, but I guess it's been it's been more than a year. It's been what, 2 years now, maybe. In the UK, we were talking about how in the UK there are privacy laws. In the European Union, there is a privacy data law called GDPR, and this really affects people like me as a marketer because it affects the type of data we are allowed to collect and how we tell people we're collecting that data, and they can opt out of being collecting in that data. And that's been presenting some real challenges, and marketing in particular, we have to think about how to do these things differently so that we can track our success and see, for instance, if someone clicks on an ad on a Google search, if they actually buy the product on the website, so that we can know that they did that. We have to do different things now. Things are changing up so that we have to track things differently because of GDPR. It was a really kind of a revolutionary thing that happened and meant a lot of changes for lots of different folks who collect data. So that's a really good point, Kate, about the GDPR piece. Does anybody else have any thoughts on data privacy and how you all have to deal with that with apps?
One thing that I'm kind of learning about right now is also for kind of an international product that hopefully will be rolling out in the European Union. So for example, a lot of streaming apps like Netflix or anything else really will have suggestions based on the things that you've previously watched for what you might like. And I think that's something that is an open question right now about how much of that can we even do, because it requires keeping track of what this particular user has watched in the past. So that's kind of just a very basic example of what can be impacted, even not taking into account selling data and all of those things.
Yeah, there's actually a couple of folks on the girls we did an exercise before y'all came on where we thought about what kind of app we would want to create and what kind of data we'd have to collect to make that app, and then how do we protect it. And there were a couple of people, there was one person, I'm so sorry, girls, because I don't remember whose app was whose, but someone had a really great idea about like Japanese anime, and they said they could make suggestions based on what you've watched before. And similar to, like I was saying to them, like Netflix, if you've watched something, it will make a suggestion for what you might also like. And so that's a really good point about like, wow, if it's collecting the data instead of you telling it, this is what I've watched, then you could really run into some privacy issues potentially with GDPR and other things. That's a whole new area I hadn't even thought about. That's a lot to think about.
Yeah, and this is one of those areas where our roles kind of overlap with other teams that you wouldn't think about with the clients that we work with. So I've spent a lot of time talking to lawyers at our client, so much that we have like little inside jokes because of implementing some of these technologies, because the lawyers don't understand the technical side and we don't fully understand the legal side. So there's kind of a disconnect there where I don't know what this legal jargon in this 18-page document that I was sent means, and they don't really fully understand kind of some of the stuff going on behind the scenes. So it's a really challenging communication hurdle, but also a pretty neat thing that we get to be able to be involved with, kind of bridging that gap.
And are there ways that you all help others understand, or how do you make your apps really usable? Like we talk about usability testing and so forth. The girls probably don't know too much about what usability testing is. Can you tell us, how do you ensure that the apps you create are something, like Muriel said, she loves the app she created, she's a user of it, and she thinks it works really well as a user, but how do you ensure that the types of apps you create are something that the end user is going to be able to find helpful and user friendly?
I think in the case of the app that I mentioned, or well, in any case, really, the one of the key factors is having a diverse team working on it and testing the app. So one of our main focuses and like selling points for that banking app was that it's accessible, meaning that people who maybe have impaired eyesight can use it, or maybe it's so a lot of things were either read out loud if the user turned on that feature, or you could increase the text size by a lot. And those are the types of things that you kind of have to keep in mind from the start. And if you don't have anyone on your team or in your user testing group, I guess, who needs those types of features, and often you won't think about it. So I think the main thing is kind of getting a diverse, in my experience, getting a diverse group of people to give feedback on what they need or what they would like.
I think that is like one really cool thing about WillowTree is like that when working with the clients in the initial stages, often they'll like bring people in from the community. I know like recently they were, working on a potential like bank application, and they brought in people of certain age groups and had them sit down and talk to them about what they wanted to see in an app. What do they like about their current banking app? What do they not like? And then also like we even have like a special room with like a one-way mirror where people from our company can actually observe actual people going through an application to kind of see like where are the things that are really difficult for them to use, and like what do they really like, just to make sure that we're really creating something that people actually want to use, which is obviously the key.
Well, and I imagine too, like with a banking app, like my parents are senior citizens, so they may have a lot more difficulty with certain types of apps than maybe someone who is younger and is used to using apps. So I can see where there could just be a whole range of feedback that you might get on an app like that, but you need to be able to make it something that everyone can feel comfortable using.
Yeah, and also some of the accessibility settings for, financial software, it becomes really important that if someone who doesn't have great vision, if they bump up the text size, it doesn't cut off any of the numbers. So like all the data makes sense still. Because on a phone, you have such a, on your computer screen, you have all this space, which is really great. But when you get into app development, it's a much tougher problem because, your phone is this big. I mean, they're getting bigger. It's crazy. But you really have to be mindful of the best way to use that space, and then especially take into consideration these accessibility settings so that you aren't entirely alienating a group of people that still you still need to be able to see your financial data even if you have a hard time seeing it.
Yeah, that's excellent. Well, let me make sure, girls, do you have any questions you want to ask before we wrap up today? Because we're a little bit over time, and I just want to make sure I don't hog all the time here and ask all the questions. So if you have any questions you want to ask, please feel free to do so. Or again, you can chat it and I'll ask it for you if you are more comfortable with that. And while we just wait and see if anybody puts any questions in or asks anything, ladies from WillowTree, do you have anything else you'd like to share with everybody before we go today? Any words of wisdom you'd like to give these young ladies that you'd like to impart with them?
This isn't, a lot of people think of, technology as something kind of intimidating. I really stumbled into this. I had to have a technology credit when I was in college and ended up switching jobs really last minute, or switching majors really last minute because I loved it so much. I have a hard time using my own television, but that doesn't mean that I can't code. It's so logic based, and it's more of a way of thinking than something that is, and it's challenging, and that's part of the fun. But anyone can really get started with this. So for me, before I got into it, I really thought there was a barrier there, but I just like to encourage people just to give it a go if they have any interest whatsoever, because it could end up being something really neat.
It looks like Chloe had a question. She said, what's the most challenging part of your job?
I think aside from everything changing a lot, like we already talked about, probably that intimidation factor that Kate just mentioned. I think it's still, I've been doing it for 3 years now, but it still sometimes feels that way. So it's just important to kind of take a step back sometimes, remind myself that I do have experience doing this and that I can probably get through whatever new challenge I'm working on. And sometimes I think being a minority in the field plays into it. Sometimes it's just really hard in general, but just kind of as everything changes so quickly, it's a really big plus for me personally that it does, but it also obviously brings some challenges.
I will add to that, Muriel, I do a lot of work with Google, so I'm actually based in Charlottesville as well. And probably about 10 years ago, I used to give a talk about how Google tracks your data. And what Google tries to do is they track your data, and then they try and decide who you are based on your search history and your web browsing history and all sorts of things. And I do a lot of coding related searches on Google because I think I'm probably like a lot of people who code JavaScript or anything, that I forget how to do something and I just Google it really quickly. And so it was interesting because there used to be a way you could see in Google what Google perceived you, who it perceived you were. And it would tell you, like, for instance, it knew I have 2 daughters, and it would knew I would do searches for things like girls' shoes, girls' dresses, things like that. But then I'd also do a lot of programming searches like, conditional statements in JavaScript or whatever it might be. And what was really funny was Google kept thinking I was a man. And I would tell people, I said, it doesn't matter how many searches I do for women's clothing or anything like that. Google still assumes I'm a man because I do these programming searches. And I would say, because at the time, back probably about 10 years ago, only about 10% of women were programmers, that Google just made this assumption about me based on the way I searched, that I must be a man. I must like women's clothing, but I'm a man. But I am clearly not a woman. And it was just really funny to me that Google could not see that in me, even though I did all these other searches that were very obviously very female oriented searches. And it could not believe that I could be a woman and be a programmer, which was very sad. But I think that's changed a lot now, especially thanks to ladies like you who are out there doing it and helping change the dynamic of the workforce and opening up more opportunity for women out there to do these types of jobs. So don't be intimidated, Muriel. You made a cool app, and even the bank people told you how cool it was. So anybody else want to share before we close up today? Okay, well, I just want to say to the ladies from WillowTree, thank you so very much for coming and sharing your knowledge and your expertise with us today. Everyone is in the chat giving me lots of thank you messages to you. We are really appreciate your time and for you to share what this is all about, because you never know, the ladies in this call may decide to make this a career path based on hearing all this awesome stuff you shared with us today. So thank you so very much. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. And ladies on the call, Girl Scouts, thanks for coming today. And again, we finished the whole badge today. So you have finished the app development badge. Thank you to everybody here today. I appreciate it. Everyone have a great little bit of the rest of your weekend. I hope you get to enjoy the little bit we have left, and hope you all stay safe and healthy. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.